Chapter 31 of Workers Together. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Workers Together or an Endless Chain by Pansy. Chapter 31. Opportunities in Disguise. Opposite to Robert Parks at the dining table sat Mr. Brooks, a young man who occupied an important position in a rival mercantile house, was several years older than Robert, and hitherto had ignored him as a younger and inferior being. On this particular evening he seemed suddenly to have resolved to cultivate the youth's acquaintance, and addressed him in a cordial tone. "Parks, go over to the Day Street reading rooms with me tonight, will you? I promised to bring in some new friends if I could, and introduce them to the library. We have just been making some fine additions." Poor Robert was beginning to feel that this was the day for invitations. Here was a very flattering one. The Day Street rooms were rather exclusive. He had never been directly invited to visit them before. "I am sorry that I cannot this evening," he said in a regretful tone. "On almost any other of my evenings which are free from business I should like to join you, but tonight I have an engagement." At just that moment he glanced at Dr. Everett. There was a slight smile on his face, and a sort of suggestive look, if I may use the term, that made Robert's face flush. He thought of their conversation in the carriage. Could the doctor mean that it was his present duty to state the nature of his engagement? What good could come of that? And it would certainly be embarrassing. Yet here came a troublesome question which insisted on being answered. What was there embarrassing about it? Was a prayer meeting a questionable place for a young man to attend? Well, but this young man was almost an unbeliever. He did not even go to church on the Sabbath. Yes, what of that? Did the Bible direct that before unbelievers we must ignore prayer meetings? Was he really so ashamed of his new colors that he could not wear them before a man who did not believe in them? Questions somewhat like these hurried rapidly through his mind, and the result was that in answer to Mr. Brooks's questioning look, he said, "I have promised to attend the Fort Street prayer meeting this evening." "Oh, I beg pardon. I was not aware that you attended a young men's prayer meeting." What was there in this sentence to make it so intensely disagreeable? Mr. Brooks did not sneer. He was too well bred to do any such thing. But haven't you sometimes heard a sneer in the voice when the face was pleasant enough? Robert flushed hotly, and his courage rose. When his personal pride was touched he could be brave. "I haven't attended a prayer meeting since I was a boy of 12 or so," he said firmly. "This is a new departure, but I propose to be regular in attendance hereafter." "Indeed!" There was that peculiar look and tone again. It was almost a sneer. A decided one would have made Robert feel very bold. He spoke now in a clear, ringing voice that could be distinctly heard around the quiet table. "Perhaps this is as good a time as any to say to our family that I believe I have taken a new departure in many ways. I desire and hope to be found on the Lord's side in the future." "Are congratulations in order, Mr. Parks? I am not very well posted as to the proprieties of the occasion. If they are, I am sure I congratulate you." Whereupon Mr. Brooks arose, and with a bow and a most significant smile immediately left the room. And Robert, somehow, felt that he had "made known the news" in a manner probably very unlike that of the shepherds of old. Dr. Everett maintained a grave silence, and Robert could almost have imagined that he disapproved of the attempt. But was it not in the very line of witnessing which he had counseled? Half an hour later Robert was waiting in the hall the coming of the doctor, when a note was handed to him. It was hurriedly scrawled, but he recognized Fred Briggs's handwriting and frowned. That fellow had given him annoyance enough during the day. What could he want now? "I say, Parks, can't you come around and spend the evening and the night with a fellow? I'm more than 2/3 sick, and a little skittish about staying up here in my den all alone, lest I might get worse. You are the only fellow within reach that I can endure the sight of tonight, or I wouldn't bore you. Some of the others will do to chaff with, but when one's head feels like mine, he wants them to keep their distance. If you've got any compassion in your heart, I hope you'll appear to me soon, for I am as blue as my mother's indigo bag. Yours dismally, Fred Briggs. It was a very gloomy-faced young man who met the doctor in the hall a few minutes later. "Read that," he said solemnly. The path of duty looked by no means so inviting to him as it had but a few moments before. He did want to go to the Fort Street prayer meeting, and he did not want to spend the evening with Fred Briggs. "It is very strange that he should send for me," he muttered, as the doctor glanced hurriedly over the note. "I did not suppose I was an intimate friend of his. In fact, I have always thought him a good deal of a nuisance." "Yet it is plainly to be seen that you are needed," the doctor said as he returned the invitation. "Poor fellow! He wants to be petted by his mother, I presume. I hope he has a good one, and that he has not been neglecting her. If anything serious is the matter, and he has no physician on his list of friends, perhaps you would do well to let me know in the morning, or tonight, if it should seem advisable. That is, you understand, I shall be glad to help if my services are needed. Your opportunities are certainly beginning, my friend." Notwithstanding that last sentence, Robert went off gloomily, feeling a little as though he had been dismissed, like a boy who was not supposed to have a mind of his own. Why, for instance, should the doctor take it for granted that he was going to throw up his engagement at the call of a fellow who had a fit of the blues? Opportunities, indeed! Much Dr. Everett knew about it. The gayest and silliest clerk in the entire store. Seriousness of any sort would be wasted on him. Besides, he had a special desire to go to that young men's meeting and identify himself with them. Why did things poke themselves in right athwart a man's line of duty? That was what he should like to know. The simple truth is that this young man had all his lifetime, hitherto, taught himself to do very much as he pleased. It was new business to find himself, within the limits of the time that he had been in the habit of calling his own, pressed into a service that was not in a line with his inclinations. He was honest in his self-surrender, but he did not understand as yet what it was to give up the control of himself to another. Possessed by such feelings, brooding over his disappointment all the way, what do you think about his being a profitable companion for Fred Briggs? He struggled to control himself, but it seemed almost impossible not to let Fred see that he considered him a nuisance, and had obeyed his summons much against his will. So well, in fact, did he succeed in making this impression, that, 15 minutes after his arrival, young Briggs would have been glad to see him depart, would have sent him away, could he have thought of an excuse for doing so. As it was, he twisted about in his not very comfortable bed and grumbled, "What in 60 do you suppose is the matter with me, anyhow? Every bone in my body aches as though I had been a racehorse and lost the prize. And my blood has gone to boiling inside of me. I believe it meditates an explosion." "Why, I presume you have taken cold," Robert said, speaking coldly enough almost to give the fellow a fresh supply. "Those symptoms are by no means either strange or very alarming." "I suppose not," Briggs said, drawing a heavy sigh, "but they are confoundedly uncomfortable." Thereupon he sprang up, with an effort to be manly and companionable, staggered into an uncomfortable wooden-backed chair, leaned his head against another, and with a miserable groan closed his eyes to shut back the tears. His head ached, and his bones ached, and his heart ached. He wanted his mother. He could imagine her, having soaked his burning feet, and plumped his pillows in some mysterious way that always seemed to make them large and cool, making gentle passes over his hot forehead with her cool, quiet hand, bending occasionally and touching her lips to his cheek with low-murmured words of tenderness. He had just such a mother. She could do all these things. It was almost impossible to keep the tears from showing as he persisted in imagining her. His heart was very tender. A gentle word would have melted him utterly. One who would befriend him now, in his loneliness and need, might count on having almost unlimited influence over him in the future. Yet here sat this newly enlisted soldier of the king, bound in honor to win other recruits from every possible source, looking gloomily into space. so utterly disappointed because he could not carry out his own cherished plan of going to the prayer meeting and showing his colors, that his eyes were blind to this opportunity, and he let his colors trail in the dust. It is almost a pity that he could not have been within hearing of Joy Saunders and Dr. Everett as they stood together in the sunset room for a moment, comparing notes as to the day's blessings. Among other things they spoke of him. "He is going to be an outspoken Christian, isn't he?" Joy said. "I was glad to hear him answer Mr. Brooks so firmly. He desires to honor his leader, and is not ashamed of his uniform. Don't you think so?" "Perhaps." But the doctor spoke the word with a thoughtful gravity that might have helped to put Robert on his guard. It is possible that some of his courage was roused by Mr. Brooks's tone. I think that is the form of courage which he has. Downright sneers would make him very bold; but whether it would be the truest kind of boldness is possibly a question. He is sincere, but he wants to do his own leading, I think, like the most of us. We must help him, Joy." And could the doctor have peeped into Fred Briggs's sick room, he would have seen that the new soldier needed helping. Chapter 32.